Montech are back. Not that they really went anywhere, I think they've been with us this whole time, but today they have unveiled this, the Sky 2 GX. Not really sure what GX stands for, maybe I was going to say great exposure, but that's weird and it doesn't even make sense. Great xylophones, maybe you can play it. I don't know. In all seriousness, this is actually, I'm reluctant to say an exciting chassis, but it's certainly one that should be on your radar if you're looking to sort of build a price performance gaming PC. Because it has all of the features really you could ask for, including a load of RGB fans included as standard, but in a chassis that costs a mere $89 in the US. It's slightly more for the white version, I think it's about $95, but realistically, I don't think you can argue with the value, or at least you couldn't if the chassis itself was good. So that's what we're going to look at here today, whether this is something that you should be buying and should be building your next system in, or whether this is a cheap, nasty case that you shouldn't even think about. Oi, I said don't think about it. Anyway, let's grab ourselves a 4070 Ti Super and do this full PC build right after a short word from this video's sponsor. Gigabyte's Aorus 16X is here, bringing the best of PC gaming in a portable package. This gaming beast packs the latest 14th gen Intel processors with up to a 24-core i9-14900HX for unbelievable performance. Not only that, but with NVIDIA's GeForce RTX 4070 and 4060 mobile graphics chips, you'll get up for ray tracing, DLSS super resolution, and frame generation. Get yours today with the link down below. So let's have a closer look at our chassis, shall we? And first off the bat, obviously this is like a mid-size ATX tower, but it tends to actually fit quite a lot of hardware inside it despite its size. And I like this because more and more people are putting computers on their desk. In fact, it's like frowned upon if you build a gaming PC and you put it on the floor.
Don't do that, what's the point?
Well, noise, like it's personal preference. But if you have a smaller size desk, then this should fit on it. And actually there's quite a lot of space to work in here as well. And one of the main differences actually, I believe, between this and the Sky 2 is this little panel that you have here, because you can either have it in like a default configuration where you don't have any fans here, you just use what comes with it, save yourself a whole bunch of money, but then it still looks pretty normal. Though I will say that the hole you have on the other side isn't gigantic, so this will be absolutely fine for airflow, but even if you can fit like radiators and things, I wouldn't really want to rely on like this smaller size cutout. It's good for extra airflow, but it's not going to be as good as some of the more dedicated chassis that have huge holes on the side. But I like the approach where you can sort of use this as a normal chassis and not have to have the fans there, because that's quite annoying and it's obviously going to add a whole bunch of money. You do actually have fantastic motherboard support on this as well. You can put like a eATX or even a server motherboard in this if you want to go down that route. And you've also got some cable management channels down the bottom, if you can see that. So it should be easy enough to build in, and I always like that you do have this little cutout here for your power supply cables, but I can feel that there is a hard drive cage underneath that, so if you're using really thick cables, this could be a little bit annoying. We give this a spin round though, so you can actually see into the other side, and I do have a feeling this is probably going to feel quite cheap, but actually it came off nice and easily, nothing catching. But yes, that's not the thickest side panel. A Be Quiet case, this is certainly not. But they have made a few changes here as well. I think you have an extra 5mm of clearance as well, so thicker cables and things should go on, and when you put the side panel on, should be a little bit easier. I love the fact that you have this hub, and this is where like the value comes in, because not only do you get the fans fitted as standard, but you get this hub that's not only good for fan speed, but also ARGB. So really easy to expand, and there are plenty of more expensive cases that don't come with this feature, and it's really quite frustrating. So you've certainly gets a good value here. Obviously, this is where you put your fans if you're going to side mount them. But how do we take the plate out? Is there another catch or something here? Oh no, it is literally just this one mechanism. Basically, you just need to rotate it until it comes out. So I like how easy it is to remove, completely toolless, but obviously because it does rattle a tiny bit, as I say, if you have hard drives or anything that moves around, that could agitate you a little bit, but we will wait and see on that. 120mm fans there, plenty of thickness as well if you did want to put something thicker in there. But actually, one other thing that I realized I forgot to mention is that this plate does also double up as extra SSD storage. I mean, obviously this is not an SSD, you will have to buy that separately, but if you have 2.5-inch drives, then you can put them on this plate. I guess it's on this side so you can actually see them. Nice touch, gives you extra storage, makes it a little bit tidier. Regardless of whether you're using that or not though, everyone gets two 2.5-inch drive bays for SSD here. And if you are going for like 5.25-inch full-size hard drives, obviously 2 bays down the bottom. You can remove this, or if you do want to put a 360 rad at the front, you can move this 1 notch over, but obviously that will eat into power supply and cable space. So if you're using a really high-end power supply and a 360 rad, you might struggle to get both in, but again, probably not a big deal with this particular chassis. In terms of fan and radiator support, 120 at the back, you don't get this included, 3 120s fitted as standard, you can go for a 280 at the top, or the front if you prefer that width. And then last, but certainly not least, a feature I do really like is that this bottom bar, which has mesh airflow for ventilation for those drives, is actually removable with 2 screws at the back. So this is going to be useful if you're someone like me that upgrades your gaming PC, you realize you haven't got enough cables plugged into your power supply and you don't want to take the whole thing out. Just remove this and then you can sort of reach into your power supply and connect cables like that. Nice way of getting better cable management too, so certainly appreciated. As for the actual PC build we're going to be putting inside this, I want to test a few different things out, so there would be some changes that I'd make if you were doing this for real, but we will discover that as we go. We're going for Intel, this is B760, this is a Wi-Fi DDR4 motherboard, and pretty much the whole theme of this is trying to cut corners where we can. So this whole rig, Editor Carl can now give us a price reveal. As you can see, very reasonable for an RTX 4070 Ti Super build. Certainly not cheap, but if you are trying to maximize price performance, I think this is going to be a decent way to go. But obviously the problem, if you like, the corner cut on this particular motherboard is that it is only DDR4, but that then allows you to get even cheaper RAM, which saves you more money. And to be honest, the differences between DDR4 and DDR5 still aren't crazy anyway. I mean, there certainly are there, but it's not going to be like night and day differences. Nice black motherboard to match our theme. The potential issue that you might find though is that DDR4 is a little bit hit and miss with availability. So I will leave a link for this down below if we can find one, but this is 32 gigabytes of RAM, as in our recent video we did actually discover that there is a difference between 16 and 32, and I imagine you would run into this potential issue with this particular GPU. Find the full video at the top right corner of your screen so you can see how 16 versus 32 versus 48 versus 64 gets on, but this is a kit of 32 gig Viper Patriot steel RGB. And I also want to point out that I am well aware we might get a bit of heat for this particular Intel CPU.
PC gaming joke.
Because this is the i5 14500, so a little bit more of a niche CPU. This one comes in at the time of filming maybe like 20 to, no, it's not 20, is it? It's about £40 less expensive than the competing 14600K, and it's still very similar. I mean, this is a 14-core CPU, 6 of which are performance cores, the rest are efficiency. As we know, efficiency cores do actually work very well for gaming. Find the video in the top right corner of your screen where we test efficiency versus performance. But this isn't going to have the same performance as the 14600K, which is why I say we've cut a little bit of a corner there. But actually, already, spoiler alert, I think there's a better CPU than both the 14500 and the 14600K. For PC gamers, it's the 14600KF, because that really is about £15–20, if that, more expensive than the CPU. And if you are going to get more performance, obviously that's going to be the way to go. If you need integrated graphics though, this certainly is going to be a great choice. And if you can get one in a sale, I would go for that, because in terms of the raw specifications, they're not hugely different. It's just this one's going to use less power and not clock quite as high, but we might be able to tweak some of that in the motherboard anyway. We'll wait and see. We have, of course, also gone for our price performance SSD, fan favorite Crucial's P3 Plus in the 1TB flavor. It certainly isn't the absolute fastest drive out there, but it still supports PCIe Gen 4 with read-write speeds that are going to be excellent for direct storage titles. As of course you'd expect, we are also going to be adding a CPU cooler, and for Intel CPUs i5, I think this one is phenomenal. Price-wise as well, you can get stupendous deals on this, but even at full price, this thing is ace, and it comes in an ARGB version as well, which is the one that we have here. It is the Arctic Freezer 36, and the secret behind this thing's performance is not only, you know, the fins, the heat pipes, all of that stuff, but it does also come with an Intel contact frame to eliminate the bottleneck that you get from heat transfer between the IHS and the cooler itself. You do get all of the tools that you need in the bag, including the contact frame itself, and then the little weird Intel screwdriver that you'll then use to actually remove the default retention bracket. I realize I've done this up, but that is actually a mistake. You need to undo that. So look, that just removes. along with the top half. This then fits on top of your CPU and then secures down with 4 screws. Remove the fans from the cooler, grab yourself some thermal compound and put a little blob in the middle like so. Place your cooler on top, screw that down. Then you can reinsert your fans as if they're an idiot sandwich. They just push into position. And then of course connect to the fan headers. Lay a case down flat, pick up and then drop in our motherboard. Remember again that all of the screws are in the hard drive cage. I mean, you don't get a nice neat box or anything, they just kind of come like this, but at least they're labeled with what they actually are. Screwy. You can then really start to see what I mean about space, because once you have got your board installed, there's still quite a lot of extra areas and things if you do want to, as I say, add the extra SSDs here, maybe thick radiators, or even if you're doing a water cooling loop, I mean, you could definitely fit like a thick pump or something here. I mean, it's a very flexible interior, and I think one of the things not a lot of people necessarily think about when they are going for a more budget-friendly chassis is expandability, because you want something that's not only fine now, but that can work with you, like with future why can't I speak? Future graphics cards and things. I mean, for example, let's say at a later stage you want to go for a 7900 XTX. Well, this can fit in there with room to spare, but if you went for a cheaper but much smaller chassis, obviously you'd have to upgrade the whole thing. Or at least hopefully you'd upgrade the whole thing. A lot of people would just order it, realize it doesn't fit, and then be sad. I'm fairly sure I've showed you the top, but just in case I haven't, a reminder again, you've got your USB-C, nice feature on a cheaper chassis, and then 2 USB 3s. Plugging them in should be straightforward enough. I mean, the cables themselves are nice and long, actually. Maybe this USB-C is borderline too long, but I mean, that's being quite nitpicky. I'd rather have a little bit too much length than not enough. They all seem pretty strong, no like really flimsy cables or anything like that, which is decent. So let's get these plugged in. And you do have these nice 45-degree cable grommets as well, which I really like. And then obviously you have this nice thick sort of bundle here as well. So it's not the most high-tech cable management in the world. There's no like, you know, thick channels or anything like that, but you've got this natural bit in the middle that should work well. But if you are using cable extensions and things, it might get a little bit tighter, because whilst you do have a decent amount of clearance here, it's nowhere near as much as like a dual chamber like space where you literally have like that to work with. So if you are going to go for cable extensions, be aware this is going to be a bit tight. Oh, and that's a nice touch too. A lot of cases are doing this now, really happy with this. You have a dedicated front panel connection rather than those like tiny individual pins. But if you have a weird motherboard that I'm yet to actually find one, somewhere in these bags, oh, it's not in a bag, I would explain it. You do actually have your splitter for the front panel, so I don't think you'll need that, but Montech have thought of everyone here. Quickfire cable management, we've got our USB 3. Below that, USB-C. Bottom right is our front panel connection, fan header for our hub, addressable RGB, and then our HD audio. I'm also going to connect our cooler RGB to the hub. Otherwise, we are actually very much on our way to completion. Obviously, 2 things left to go with our 4070 Ti Super. Zotac have literally just sent this one out with thanks. And I say this like quite a lot on the channel. I think it's not necessarily the best all-round graphics card because it's still quite expensive, but for my personal needs, if I was going to buy a GPU tomorrow, I think this is what I would go for, because you get all of those NVIDIA exclusive features that, yes, obviously you do have to pay for. AMD cards is certainly better value, but for what I play and the way I like to play it, which is with a little bit of ray tracing if I can, I think DLSS is a lot better than FSR. Frankly, it's the way I personally would want to go for like playing on like a 4K monitor, maybe 4K performance, that sort of setting. It's not actually a huge GPU, this one. If you go for a 4080 in the exact same flavor, I'm sure it'd be a whole lot bigger. But it's a nice looking card and it's jet black, so it does perfectly match our theme. Just need to remove the slot covers that are actual real covers. You don't have to bend them out like you do on other cheaper chassis, and you do also have proper thumb screws as well. So actually, so far, I've not really had any complaints with this case other than it feels a little bit cheaper than others. I mean, it's nowhere near the quality of like a £50 case or something like that. I know Americans like, £50? Wow, that's quite a lot. Yes, we're talking English money here. Good old pound sterling. The money's coming out with a king on it soon. Fun fact. But yeah, certainly if I was using this for my personal build, while it wouldn't be as good as some of the more like expensive chassis, I don't think I would actually be disappointed. And especially if it was like my first PC build or something, I wouldn't even notice. Let's drop this into position. And with that, that is actually, if this was like an Asus BTF build, that would be all you would see. That would be your lot, because obviously it's just a power supply to go, which will add a few extra cables and things. But I'm pretty happy with this, as I say, so far. There's not really been anything that sort of caught me out. I mean, you do get a little bit extra clearance at the top as well versus the original Sky 2 if you do want to go for an all-in-one, which wouldn't be a bad idea. But I think you'll agree that what we have here is actually a really nice balance. Right, just the power supply to go then, and this is a new, I think this is actually a refresh, but let's go with it, a new one from Corsair. This is the RM750E, so 750, because obviously we've got a powerful graphics card that does need a fair amount of juice. But fundamentally, if you are going to buy a new power supply for this, please make sure you buy one that does actually come with a PCI Gen 5 connection in the box, so you don't have to use that horrible adapter to get your graphics card to be powered up, because that will ruin the whole look of your build. As with pretty much every case I've ever used, we do have ventilation at the bottom, so when you do have your power supply ready, obviously make sure you are plopping it in down the bottom. The first thing I'm going to want to do is actually plug in the SATA hub, which is used for the fan and ARGB, and then I can tuck all of that out of the way. I will put the hard drive cage back in though, and then kind of just like stuff this in there. Our big thick ATX can go next. Perhaps my biggest question though is whether this hole for the PCIe is actually in the right place. Is this going to look good? I've fed it through. I'll get that connected really nice and tight. Yeah, that looks all right. I mean, I don't like the fact that it's kind of going away from the graphics card. I think if you had a bigger GPU, it would probably look a little bit normal. In an ideal world though, I just want like a bigger cutout here, because I think that would make it look nicer, especially with this card, because you'd be able to see everything better. I'm being very nitpicky here, but I don't understand when cases have this hole all the way over there. We want it in the middle, please. Is that all right, Montech? But last, but certainly not least, let's plug in our CPU connections at the top left. But assuming that you do use the cable tie that you do get in the box, this is what the whole thing will look like. I might actually be able to kind of stuff that in there. There you go. That gives you like a rough estimation. I think quite good. I mean, this is not the most crazy system we have in terms of like extra fans and things. Obviously, once you put something here, it might get a little bit more tricky, but I think they've managed it quite well considering, really. You can also like mount some fans here as well if you want to do that to give your graphics card a little bit more airflow. You're always going to struggle with putting a 120 here because obviously there's a power supply in the way. Should we see if it works? Well, actually, we should see if the side panel fits on first. I'm very confident on this. No issues whatsoever. That has so far gone perfectly to plan. So far. And you know what? Let's waste no time advertising the awesome PC-centric mouse mat that you can find at pccentric.store or linked down below, and actually turn this thing on and see if it works. Yes? Yes, there we go. I mean, I will say the RGB fans are not that RGB when you're actually looking at the PC on the inside. Obviously, you do have it on the front. I can see it over there, which is nice. But if you did want to upgrade the fans at a later date, then yes, I think that would be a solid thing to do. But bearing in mind you're getting 3 RGB fans for $89 along with the rest of the case, I don't think that's too shabby. And I think the whole rig looks pretty awesome as it is, really. Obviously, you've got the RAM, you've got the RGB on the Zotac GPU, and then the cooler itself. So I think for the money, you're definitely getting a lot here. But if I was to criticize anything, it would perhaps be that it's a little bit bland. It doesn't really do anything to stand out versus the crowd and the competition, but I would much rather have a case that you could customize with the hardware itself and let everything inside sing than have like a big gimmick. I mean, there is a case called like the Void X or something like that, that has like this like huge like infinite mirror on the front, but then that blocks out like all your airflow. It looks great in photos, but in practicality, you know, not really the one to go for. And then the rest of the case feels really cheap. So I think Montech have done a really good job of blending everything together, giving you a lot of options and expandability. Just yeah, if you are going to put hard drives inside this, as I say, be aware that you might get a little bit of rattling from that. But let's test out the thermals on this and see how it performs. I mean, actually, can you change the RGB with the button on the top? It says reset, which doesn't bode well, but sometimes the reset button becomes the RGB button. It's a reset button. And I want to start this by doing the compulsory peel. Oh, that hasn't gone to plan. That is the worst peel I've ever done. If that wasn't satisfying, I don't know what was. But anyway, actually jumping into some gameplay, this is the latest Ratchet & Clank, and this is running with ray tracing. So we've got very high settings across the board, bit for both the ray tracing and the default. This is running on a 4K monitor, so very high end, but we are compensating, if you like, by using DLSS Performance and DLSS Frame Gen. In terms of the way it plays, well, we're getting around about 120 to 130 frames a second, and everything is super smooth. This is why I say I really like this GPU for myself personally, because even if you are rocking a high resolution display, you can still use DLSS and all of those technologies and to sort of have your cake and eat it without spending loads and loads of money on a gaming PC. But again, like £800 for a graphics card is definitely like crazy. It's a lot. I wish they were a lot cheaper, but they are not. That is the reality. But I wanted to boot this up not only to show you the capabilities of this machine, but realistically, obviously, to test what this is actually like when it comes to cases and thermals. So the PC has been running this game for around about 5-10 minutes or so, and as you can see, we're not hitting anywhere near anything that's a cause for concern. Around about 63 degrees on that GPU and 54 on the CPU. This is with the side panel on as well. And if you do want a quick noise test, again, basically nothing. I'd say that as long as you've tuned everything properly, this is going to be an awesome rig, but obviously it is going to depend on the fans that you use, the cooling, all of this stuff. If you go for that like higher end i5, then it is going to produce more heat, will produce more noise. Likewise, the case fans themselves are absolutely fine, but if you don't if you don't tune these, they will obviously cause a lot more noise. I mean, by default, this MSI motherboard had it running at like 100% load, maybe like 70%, something like that. Sounded like a jet was going to take off. So if this is loud, that's the reason. Please tune your fans. But otherwise, I have to say, on the whole, I do really like this chassis. I mean, inflation isn't something that I talk about too much in these videos, but the problem with cases recently is that you have quite a few chassis that came out like 4 or 5 years ago that are still on sale, and for the price that they were new, you might be thinking this is the same price, but the reality is cases are getting more and more expensive. So I think for your $89, you're definitely getting a lot here, but I would strongly urge you to check sales and things to see what's on offer, because I would kind of give the build quality of this like a 6.5 out of 10, I'd say, whereas something like a Corsair 4000D, that frankly is a little bit, is it a bit smaller? There's not too much in it, but that is definitely a very cramped chassis if you're going to put a lot in there. I would say that the build quality of that is noticeably better, but I actually prefer the case fans that you get here. You've got RGB as standard, and it's a lot cheaper to work with as well because you've got that hub around the back. You don't have to add any extra like Corsair bits and bobs to get the full experience. So yes, if you are looking at this case, I pretty much would say there's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing really about it other than its value that makes it a standout choice for your next gaming PC. But we'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of the Sky 2 GX? Do you agree with me that it's a solid option, or would you rather go for something that's a little bit more out there? We'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video, please smash the like button and get yourself subscribed. And as always, if you are interested in current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it listed down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out the awesome AORS G16X? This 2024 gaming beast packs a 16-inch 165Hz display with Dolby Vision and a pin-sharp resolution of 2560 by 1600. Factor in the latest 14th gen Intel CPUs, Nvidia's 40 series of mobile graphics, and Gigabyte WindForce Infinity fans, and you've got the gaming laptop of your dreams. It even comes with Gigabyte's AI Nexus software for better performance, acoustics, and battery life. Learn more today with the link down below. But thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.